to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Today, we're going to dive deep into our mindset. You've heard me say many times that mindset is often the biggest thing that I end up working on and talking with my coaching clients about. And by the way, no surprise here, it's often the biggest thing that my coaches end up working with and talking to me about in our sessions. I'm an average garden variety human too, right? Now, we've also had guests on the podcast many times talking to us about confidence, abundance, the psychology of time management, all the things. But here's what I do know about mindset. Most of us realize we have various limiting beliefs, those thoughts between our ears that keep us from breaking out of patterns and that ultimately prevent us from achieving our goals. And yet, knowing we have a mindset problem and overcoming it is quite another matter. Right? It's so much more complicated than just saying, I need to be more confident, or even saying, I'm going to be more confident, right? And the reason why it is more complicated than that, according to my guest today, Jisun Sunny Fisher, is because our mindset is actually deeply ingrained in our brains. Jisun works at the intersection of spirituality and science to help people like us rewire their brains and unlock the path to success. I first heard Jisun speak on my daughter Christy's podcast, Sass Says. She spoke with Christy about losing yourself in motherhood and then finding the path back to yourself again. And when I heard her speak, I knew that she would have great things to share with us here as well. Today, Jisun is sharing with us how the brain serves as the blueprint for success and what we can do to work through our limiting beliefs on a deeper level so that we can carve out success for ourselves. Jisun is a licensed psychologist, published author, and a happiness coach who helps courageous leaders remember their true north and rediscover what makes them fall in love with their life again. Through her powerful and unique guidance, clients of Jisun's learn to master their narratives, break old patterns, and turn weaknesses into superpowers. They learn to embody absolute clarity, unshakable confidence, and ultimate conviction. Jisun received her graduate degrees from Columbia University and the University of Connecticut. Jisun is also certified in positive psychology, neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis. Her thought leadership has been featured in Yahoo Life, Thrive Global, Bustle, Goldcast, and more. Let's hear what Jisun has to say about how our brains serve as our blueprint for success. Hey, Jisun, thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi, LuAnn. I'm so excited to finally be here with you.
I know. I have to say, ever since I heard your episode on Christy's podcast, Sass Says, my daughter's podcast, two things. I just loved the conversation that you guys had, but I also was very acutely aware of the care that you were taking of her in that conversation. And I I think just as a regular person, if I were just any person listening, I think it was noticeable, your compassion for her in that conversation. But to be her mother and hear somebody care for her in that way, in that conversation, I just thought, wow, that's a beautiful human. So I want to thank you for that, Jisun.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, yeah, it was really impressive. And so then I was like, Christy, I want to meet Jisun.
Well, here we are. I'm so glad we're
That's it.
connected.
That's it. That's it. So here's the thing. You have a great topic for us. It is the brain's blueprint for success. And my audience knows me well, Jisun. They know that from the time I was 10 years old, my mom and my Aunt Honey were feeding me books on, Wayne Dyer and your erroneous zones, and, Andrew, what you call it, Dale Carnegie and Napoleon Hill and Og Mandino. And that always takes you into this other space of, that you are consistently, consciously aware that your brain is capable of so much more that we actually give it credit for, as far as in creating a life that we desire, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so I am really excited to learn about the blueprint for success. So where do we start with this, Jisun?
I love this. I think a great place to start is the reason why I thought that this topic would be of great and dear space in your heart, and as well as your listeners. When I think of myself and how far I've come and where I come from, I find myself at the intersection of science and spirituality. And I am super passionate about helping other people in this world rewrite distorted love maps and help to redefine what we've been conditioned to believe was possible.
Mm.
So, a couple years ago, more than a couple years ago, but a few years ago, I fell down this rabbit hole of hypnosis. And it's when I found hypnosis that I really began to understand how remarkable it is that we have this organ called the brain. But today, I want to talk to you a little bit more about what I've actually come to find in terms of the importance of the brain within the context of the whole, and why this specific topic of the subconscious, the unconscious mind, as well as mastering ourselves, mastering this journey of becoming that hero in our own story is
Mm.
so near and dear to my heart.
I love
So
it.
I think the best place to start is I've always been really curious about what success looks like, how we define success, and how I could, quote unquote, one day get there. And the thing, LuAnn, that I've learned over and over again, not just in my own work, but working with clients, is that success is most often defined for us by other people.
Mm.
So when I first started working with my clients as a licensed psychologist, I found that a lot of the work that I was doing with individuals was helping them to understand or wrap their heads around why they spent so many years climbing up this tall ladder
Mm.
that they thought was getting them to the top of this building that they wanted to get to, only to get to the top and then look down and go, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong place. So then they have to climb all the way back down and then lean that ladder somewhere else. So I
Mm.
wanted to help people understand how to wrap their heads around what it means to, quote unquote, climb the ladder in a way that they feel is aligned to them. So that's
Mm.
been really something that's just kind of pulled at my heartstrings ever since I was little. And
Interesting.
the work in the hypnosis and the what I do is bring up to the conscious awareness what is unconscious. So when we understand what it means to have a brain that is responsible for things that is not within our awareness and that is not typically accessible in this particular state where you and I are talking to each other, LuAnn,
Hmm.
it really drives the force of understanding how big our potentials are and how to not get overwhelmed with what that potential means and how we can fill that potential.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, among other things, a little nugget I heard in there is there may be a part of us, and there probably is a part of most of us, that recognizes, if we're really looking in the mirror, that, and if we take the time to do the reflection, that we might have defined success by what our mothers, our fathers, our friends, our husbands, our wives, our peers have called it. That I understood. That seems very logical to me. that we could all fall prey to doing that. But what I think I heard you in there is that it sounds like then additionally, our brain at a subconscious level has two things happening, has our true desire unconscious there, but also
Mhm.
has built in on those other people's desires for us, and as it's kind of jumbled inside of there, which is really our desire, and which is really the desire that's been implanted to us by our experiences.
Yes. Oh, that's
Wow.
really well said. So a lot of the work is about rewriting those distorted love maps that we were given.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for us to do that, we need to be clear about what's ours and what isn't ours. So what's someone
Right.
else's story that we took on. And
Yeah, see,
the
that's I'm getting
awesome,
that, right? Yeah,
yeah.
I'm getting that.
And the awesome thing about this work is that it happens so naturally when we know how to tap into the unconscious mind.
Okay, because
Be-
when you are at that deep level of, I guess, connection to
Mhm.
your true brain and your unconscious, then it's almost like I always talk about on the show about listening to your inside voice. Like your
Mm.
true inside voice knows your North Star. And so
Yes.
the hypnosis helps you tap into that.
Yes. And this
Whoa.
is a really great place to make that distinction. There is a difference between that inside voice that knows your North Star, that is your compass. And then we also have an inner voice that actually speaks from a place of fear and wants to
Mm-hmm.
keep us safe.
Right.
So I think that's a really great distinction to make. And I think we're going to be able to make it in our conversation today.
Okay. Okay. So where do we go from here?
Can I break down what the brain looks like for you, for
Sure.
us, in order for
Sure.
us to continue this conversation in a way where we can learn to hijack it?
Okay.
So there is a part of our brain that's called the reticular activating system. It's called the RAS for short. And the RAS, its only function is to filter out all of the noise and to bring up to your conscious awareness what's important. So at any given point in time, we have millions, if not billions, of information data that is coming into our five senses. But it's part of your reticular activating system to filter all of that information out and only give you the things that are important. The thing is, our RAS is programmed to filter information that, whether we think of it as a bad thing or a good thing, so whether it's a limiting belief or a positive belief, it will feed all of that information to you. You're just not consciously aware of the process that's happening when you're receiving information. So if you have a limiting belief, I'm not good enough to lead a team of 25 members or a group of 25 people to build a company. I'm not good enough to have a successful podcast, for example. That limiting belief, although it's below our conscious awareness, it actually programs our RAS to send only that information that coincides and aligns with that belief up to our conscious awareness. So even though we're telling ourselves in our brain, in our heads, like, I really want to be or have a successful podcast, that's not going to work if underneath you've programmed your RAS to only give you data that's pertinent to you saying, I can't have a successful podcast.
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, so and why? Why would it pick that? Is it just because you because the fear? Like why does it pick that? Like that's almost reminds me when somebody says sometimes like they're afraid to succeed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they almost like sabotage themselves. But that's actively, outwardly, you're talking about it's like your brain is reinforcing the idea that you've already got. And so what you're saying is instead of seeing four different opinions on it, it's only bringing to your awareness consciously the things that reinforce the bad opinion, the bad
Yes.
story.
Exactly. And that
Okay.
happens because our brain is wired. If we think of our brains being thousands of years old, it's been passed down to us from our ancestors, and it's wired to look for the things that are wrong, that is lacking, that is violated, might potentially violate your safety. So we are wired in our brains to look for the thing that doesn't belong, to look for the thing that is wrong. So if we have a limiting belief that our brain thinks is important to keep us safe, and it's not just physiologically safe anymore, it's the psychological safety that's important as well, then our brain is going to filter all of the information that says, okay, this is a thing that we need to watch out for. So let's feed her this information.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So you're probably, I mean, this is probably going to be a detour, is my guess. But what happens in the people that this doesn't happen for, right? That we're not constantly experiencing this level of bombardment with something that, like, I always call a story in your head. And I always tell the designers I work with, I'm like, so you have that story in your head that you can't close the $200,000 job. Like, whatever, put a story in your head that you can close the $250,000 one. Like, it's a story. You made it up. It's no more true. Like, I'm like, okay, so let's close $1 million one. They're like, what? I'm like, that's a story too. Which story do you want to believe? Right. So how does that work?
Yes. So there are stories that are just stories, things we hear that's pertinent to other people. And then there are those stories that are very enchanting. And the stories that are enchanting happens at a specific frequency. So LuAnn, you and I are speaking at a frequency in terms of the brain waves where it's the beta, where we are consciously aware of each other. We are organizing our thoughts. We are listening to what we're saying, and then we're organizing our responses. Underneath the beta frequency is the alpha frequency. This is when you're relaxed and you want to read a story. You have a cup of tea in front of you, and you're just in the state of just relaxation. That's the alpha frequency. The frequency underneath that is the theta. And the theta frequency is where all the magic happens. This is where trance and hypnosis happens. This is where the enchantment happens. This is why when we tell ourselves a story in that beta state, I can make $1 million tomorrow. That's in the beta. If it's an enchanting story that's compelling and it's done in the theta frequency, then your brain begins to believe it.
Now we're going to go back to the way I was raised. I was raised with meditation. 10 years old. We were lay down on the floor, 6 of us kids. Aunt Honey would lead us through a guided meditation. And she would talk to us about alpha and beta and theta and all the things. And it's so funny because I didn't have the scientific description for it, but I know I've talked to my kids about when you are like, I was saying, like, because I'm a big visualizer. I'm like, this is exactly how this is going to go. This is what's going to happen, and la, la, la. And I would always say to them, but you have to really attach the passion to it. And so that was my language. And I think what I didn't know, what you're saying is, and attach that enchantment to it, really get into that level of concentration. But it's not concentration like I'm concentrating hard. I'm always like, I would say to them, just relax, would you? Would you take 5 deep breaths and then picture the home run? Like, would you just do it? And they look at me like, I can't just picture a home run and get it. I'm like, but you can. If you do it every single morning at breakfast, just sit there, take a deep breath, picture that you got a home run. You'll probably get some home runs.
Yeah. So that actually goes to a lot of us who believe we're not visual thinkers. We don't think we can imagine particular visual scenarios in our heads. And then we incorporate that belief into our identity. This is where a lot of that magic happens. We have a lot of stuff that we build into the stories of who we are and our identities. So I've worked with so many clients that will come into my office and say, I'm not a visual thinker. I can't quote unquote visualize. The thing is, that is the language of your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind does not speak English. It does not speak Korean. It does not speak Russian. It speaks pictures and emotions.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've always felt like it has to have that emotion attached to it, that realness to you. This is important to me. I really want this. This isn't a fleeting thought. This is real for me. You know what I mean? So that's very interesting. And it's funny because it was just a couple weeks ago, I don't know, an episode, somebody was talking about tapping in and meditating. And, I didn't go into the whole thing of describing it, but when you are raised from 10 years old to literally be able to take 5 deep breaths and be at this theta level of your mind, like, you can do it. It's like, you can, and you just, all right, I'll just sit here for a few minutes and put all this out into the universe. Like, that's my language. Okay. Let me just grab a moment here. Let's reframe what we want to have happen and how this is going to roll. Okay. So the thing is, your work is with people way on the other side, people that this is new information and they have no experience with meditation and tapping into their subconscious and all of that. And what you're saying is that hypnosis helps you do that as an adult so that you
Yeah.
bypass all of the, I'm not so sure this is true part, right? Like you just
Yes.
get down.
Yes. So I
Okay.
do work with individuals who have no idea how to meditate, how to get into their Zen space. And I also work with individuals who believe that they know how to do that, but they don't actually harness what you said, the power of that
Right.
attaching the compelling emotion to what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
They believe
Interesting.
that meditating is just sitting there and going to a blank slate. It could
Right.
be. You could also take it a step further.
Yeah.
And you described what is called coherence in a really, really amazing way, where you said
Mm.
just relax, breathe, take 5 breaths. The thing about the heart, this is what I wanted to share in terms of like, I got really excited about the brain. And then I realized the brain, he's just like a secondary player. The primary player, the key player in all of this is the heart.
Mm.
The heart has this electromagnetic frequency that literally goes through every part of your body, every cell, every space between each cell. And then it actually exudes a frequency a couple feet outside of you as well. The heart, its electromagnetic frequency is actually 60 times stronger than the brain.
Whoa.
60 times
Wow.
stronger than the brain. So we think this brain up here in our skulls is what's in control, and behind the wheel, it's not, it's the heart. In
Wow.
fact, if we go into our bioanatomy, we would find that there is more neurological circuits going from your heart to the brain than there is brain to the heart. So we
Mm.
know that because the body has equipped us in a way where the heart has more to say to the brain, those circuits are a lot more vast and a lot stronger than the circuits coming down from the brain to the heart.
Wow.
And what you described when you said, I take 5 breaths and I get into that zone, that's coherence. It's
Mm.
putting your heart in a space. It's called HRV, it's heart rate variability. But people who are able to increase their heart rate variability by being able to relax their hearts in the way that you described, LuAnn,
Mm-hmm.
they
Mm-hmm.
have better wellness. They can relax better. They decrease their level of stress. They increase performance. It's not just about relaxing, right? They actually can increase performance in sports, at work. They have better mental clarity. They have increased energy. And that coherence, what that does when you take 5 deep breaths and then you take 5 deep breaths out. It's box
Mm.
breathing, right? But you also
Right.
have that space in between.
Yep.
You get to a place where you activate your parasympathetic system. And
Mm.
all of a sudden, you achieve what's a mind heart coherence. And coherence, all it essentially means is to bring into a unified whole. So all of a sudden, your body is all working together instead of fighting each other.
Yeah.
And there's no drainage of any energy that's lost. And all of a sudden, you're an efficient machine.
Wow. It's so crazy because when you learn what to do as a child and it's reinforced through your whole life and don't necessarily have ever learned the science behind it, it's pretty crazy.
It's amazing what we
Yes.
find at the intersection of science and spirituality.
Yes, yes. It's funny. I'll just tell you a quick story. So, one of the things, so there were 6 of us kids that my mom and my aunt used to teach to meditate, and we went to different, seminars and all the things. It was very, very prominent in our lives. It was not like, oh, once a year somebody brought it up. But the one mechanism that they used to use, and you probably have the scientific for what is, but as children, we were taught, you take 5 deep breaths. And each time you say, I'm going to a deeper, more productive level of the mind. I'm going to a deeper, more value, higher level of the mind. I'm going deeper and deeper to the highest level of my mind, right? And then they would say, now, and my aunt would walk us through this visualization of it, and we'd all be laying all over the floor in the living room. And she'd say, now we're going to go to your laboratory. And of course, you're 10, you're 11, you're 12. And she'd say, is everybody ready to go to your laboratory? And then she'd say, okay, deep breaths. And then she'd count us down 10 to 1. And, very slow, very consciously, carefully counting us down. And she'd say, we're here. Open the doors. Who's here to guide you? And she would just say,
Mm.
who's here? It's different for all of you. Somebody's here to guide you. And what did I now as adult know is it was just tapping into my inner highest most self, right? But she's like, you
Yes.
can have 2 guides. There's 2 guides here. And anytime you have a problem, you have a question, you come all the way to your laboratory and you ask your guides the question and you say to them, are open to the answer when they're open to giving it to you. And she goes, and sometimes you're going to get it in the laboratory. Sometimes you'll forget it walking down the road the next day. I mean, it was like crazy. Literally taught as 10 years old, right?
My goodness.
Isn't that nuts?
Oh, I love that so much. And
Right.
LuAnn, it's nothing like quote unquote woo woo or special in terms of being able to do it. We all
No.
have that capacity to go
Yeah.
into our inner laboratory.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Isn't it funny? But to make it such
Absolutely.
a process that it's impressionable to a kid, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it was always like all my life. I'm like, all right, it's time to go to your lab. Like you gotta you need a minute, sweetie. Like, go all the way down to the lab. The 5, 4, 3,
Oh,
2, 1 is
wow.
not enough today. Get down
Wow,
there.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
So
So, but
much.
what the thing is that I guess I'm indulging in the conversation in the sense of me sharing this because I really had no idea where you were going to go. But from the standpoint of if you're listening and you're just like, well, I don't know, it's like I'm telling you, this is real. Like this is like it really. I learned it through the language of a child, and now I'm
Mhm.
hearing it through the language of a psychologist. And you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
it's you're backing up the experience that I've had, and it's great.
I
So
love
tell
that.
us more. Yeah, right. So we have this mind heart coherence, like brain heart
Mhm.
coherence, and
Mhm.
then I think you mentioned to me something about the power of subconscious language. This is a huge one in my
Yes.
world, and then
Mhm.
listeners have heard me say 1,000 times, cancel, cancel. You say something negative around me, I'm going to go cancel, cancel. We have to tell the universe you did not mean that. So, so, so now give me the scientific
Yeah.
explanation of it.
So here's the thing about language is that we understand language in a way where we have to be using the prefrontal cortex. When we're using just the prefrontal cortex, we're not allowing ourselves to go into that inner laboratory. So yes, the things we tell ourselves are very strong and powerful and important, and it's not because of the language we use. The language we use is only a reflection of the frequency or the emotion that we're experiencing on the inside. So when
Okay.
you notice a specific language that you're using that might be harsh or critical, it's not because of that language that you're programming your subconscious or your unconscious mind. It's actually the opposite way. Your unconscious mind is already feeling it. It's experiencing it.
Coming out. It's
So it's
coming
coming
out.
out. So it's
Mm.
reflecting back for you what needs to be processed and
Addressed.
if you address if you'd like to, or keep it the way it is if you don't.
Well, if it doesn't serve you, I'm all for processing and addressing
Yeah.
it.
And what you
Okay.
said about LuAnn, people listening to this going, oh, I don't know if that's real, if it really works. Is it just like a stage show that you might see, on TV or in a movie or in college? The thing about the unconscious mind is that it is the bridge to who we are, how we process and perceive this world as a quote unquote human being. The unconscious mind is the bridge to our right now moment processing to our higher self, that higher spirit.
Mm.
So I've always been like waist deep in the science, the psychology of it. I love the data. And it
Mm.
wasn't until a few years ago when I realized and I learned that I actually come from a long line of shamans that I
Mm.
began to incorporating this work of spirituality, the human journey, the hero's journey, what it means to be here with a life purpose. What does that entail? How do we navigate this world in a way that it's meaningful? So it's not just I've checked off my boxes.
Right.
And the biggest thing that comes up is this area and this work of shame. We are so ingrained with shame that we don't even recognize it. It's kind of like when you go to a fish and you ask the little fish, hey, do you know what water is? The little fish is going to look back at you and go, what? What's water? Because
Right.
it's
Right.
all
It's
it
just
swims
it's
around.
always there. It's never been
Right.
not there, right?
Yeah, and I actually heard this quote recently. Someone said like the biggest lie that the devil was able to have this world believe is that it doesn't exist. And that's
Mm.
the thing about shame. And we can cover it up however we want to. We can call them fears. We can call them a vulnerability. Oh, I don't like being vulnerable. What does it mean to be vulnerable? But it really comes down to the root of shame. And shame, LuAnn, is just a distortion of our true power. And that distortion only happened because in this human life experience, we were met with a demand where we didn't have the resources to meet those demands. So what we did was we went inside, we stored it, we distorted a pure frequency and then brought it back up.
Mm.
So this is why we have shame. We have shame when we are met with experiences in our lives where we don't have the resources to meet them successfully. And so we go inside to a pure frequency that's inside, we distort it, and then we bring it back up. And then we don't want to look at it.
Okay. So, what are we talking about here, Jisun? Are we talking about little micro events throughout our life? Are we talking about just major ones that we
Mhm.
have experienced that not having the ability to process it, like you said? Clear me up, like get me
Yeah.
like to something
Yeah.
that.
Both. So the major ones would be something that's traumatic. Maybe I was sexually assaulted when I was 17. That's a
Mm,
major one. A
mhm.
minor one could be maybe my mom telling me, oh, you're too small to do the dishes, or you're too X to do Y. And then
Okay.
all of a sudden, even though I want to do those things and I have this experience where I'm met with this demand of, can you rise above what she's telling you? I can't. She's my mother. And I'm
Mm,
5 years old. I can't say that I'm big enough to do what I want.
right.
So what I do is I go inside and I distort whatever it is that is pure inside of me. And then I begin to believe these things about myself.
Okay. Okay.
And this is where a lot of the wounding comes from.
Mm, okay. Right. So this is when you, like you said, sometimes we define our success by other people's opinions. It's also we define our value sometimes on the things
Yes.
that we were told as a child, as an adult, by it could be a partner. You could, have picked a partner at 25 and been with them for 10 years, and that could have made an indelible imprint on you if that partner always said something. Oh, you never know,
Mhm.
you can't cook good, or you're just not a good person, little or
Yeah.
big, like you said, right?
Yeah. I remember when I was little. So I was 7 when I came to the States, LuAnn, and I remember being the only Asian kid in my class. And I was never taught about culture or diversity or how to perceive myself in a way that I can actually embrace how I looked, how I
Mm.
spoke, my culture, in such a way that I began to, and I didn't even realize this until way later, but I began to feel ashamed of being Korean.
Mm, mm,
So these things that come up in our experience where we might be in a class and people or our peers are making fun of the way that I speak, for example, could be a micro or macro event that happens that puts an experience, it stamps it into my subconscious memory and says, this is not where I feel safe. So anything related to you being Asian is a thing that now we're ashamed of. And that's all we're going to find and filter through your RAS.
whoa. Right. Right. Okay. So where does this go from here? Do we go for, is this therapy to rewire this, or are there like tactics that your garden variety
Mhm.
human can engage in
Yes,
to try
that's a really great question. So I
and
believe that therapy, counseling, coaching is something we all need because of our human conditioning.
Mhm.
However, if you're in a space where you're not in a place where you want to work one-on-one with individuals, for example, there are things that you can ask yourself. So there are 3 major questions you can ask yourself to see where your areas of shame come from. This is really important. Remember, my work is to bring to the conscious awareness what is unconscious because we want coherence. We want to bring it up and integrate it into your unified whole so that you're not draining energy out. When we bring up our shame from the unconscious by asking 3 simple questions, what we're doing is now step 1, we're aware of what we're ashamed about. A lot of people don't know what their shame looks like.
right.
So just being aware of what we're ashamed of is super important. Once we're aware of what we're ashamed of, there are things that we can do depending on where the shame is coming from. So the 3 questions we ask ourselves is, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I happy? Really interesting thing, LuAnn. When I was writing my book and doing the research to write my book, something came up and clicked for me. I realized the 3 only things that keep this world spinning, and you can take a guess at what you think they are, the 3 only things that keep this world spinning have evolved, have stemmed from the way that our brain is wired. Inside of our brains, we don't have or inside of our skulls, we don't have one brain, we have 3 brains. The first part of the brain that evolved as human beings is the brain stem. It's called the reptilian brain. This part of the brain is responsible for things like, do I have food? Do I have safety? Do I have a safe place to sleep? Am I going to survive another day? Above the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain evolved. And the mammalian part of the brain is responsible for things like emotions, feeling connected, community, connections. So that's the mammalian brain. And then the last thing to evolve as part of our human brain in these skulls that we have is the human part of the brain. This is the part of the brain that logic works through. This is the part of the brain that says, what do I want to eat for dinner? This is the part of the brain that says, oh, my husband just said this to me. This is what I'm going to retort back.
Right, right.
The thing about the way that the brain has evolved, though, there are safety mechanisms, a safety valve that clicks on when different parts of the brain are active. So when your brainstem, the reptilian brain, is activated, it doesn't matter what you're going to eat for lunch later because it turns everything else in the brain off. So if you're crossing the street and you're about to get hit by a car, you don't care about that fight you just had with your daughter. You're going to, your body's going to react. Do I run forward? Do I freeze? Or do I run backward?
Right.
The same thing with the mammalian part of the brain that evolved over that reptilian brain. If you don't feel loved, if you don't feel like you matter or that you belong or that you are connected to the right people in the right way, it really doesn't matter what you're going to wear to the wedding this weekend, right? The logical brain turns off. So the way that our brains are wired, the three parts of the brain, it actually gives us really, really clear clues as to the three things that keep this world running. It's death, love, and power. Those are the only three things that keep this world running. We think it's money. Well, what does the money actually serve, right? So when it comes to death, if you feel like the question, am I safe? And it's not just physiological safety at this point, it's also psychological safety. If you feel like you're not safe and your sense of shame comes from that question, if it triggers that question, you're going to realize you need to balance two really important but polarizing human needs. As human beings, we have a need to feel in control of ourselves and our environment. Would you agree?
Yes, right.
We also have, as human beings, a need to feel cared for. I don't want to always be in control. I want someone to just take the reins for a second.
Right.
Those are two basic, polarizing, opposite needs, but they're still both needs as human beings. So if your sense of shame gets triggered by that question, am I physically or psychologically safe? If you don't feel like you are, it's because those two needs are not in balance. If you have a shame that comes from the question, am I loved? You're not sure if you feel loved in your world. It comes from, again, two balancing or unbalanced, actually, if we're going to be specific, two core human needs. The need to be special. I want to feel unique, right? Am I special? We also have, as part of this human journey, the need to feel the same as everyone. We don't want to stick out like a sore thumb sometimes. So when your sense of shame comes from that question, am I loved, or the lack of that feeling, it's because you haven't balanced those two needs, needing to feel it's special, and then needing to feel the same as everyone else.
Crazy.
Isn't it?
Yes.
If your sense of shame comes from the question, am I happy? It goes to that power, that sense of power we need. And it's not, we've distorted it to mean power over other people, but it's essentially, it's a self-power, self-mastery. So if you feel like you have a sense of shame related to, am I happy? It means that your need to feel, this is going to strike some people here, the need for you to be selfish is not balanced with your need to feel selfless. So the idea of, am I happy? Do I have a legacy? Am I in full power of myself? Is this idea that we need to distinguish ourselves as separate from everyone else, but together? So can I give as much as I receive? Do I feel like I deserve the love that I give to other people? Can I receive as much as I give?
Wow.
I know.
It's like, yeah, I'm just like, whoa. So the thing is, I can see why there are psychologists on the planet. Because I don't think that, I mean, you've given us three questions to ask ourselves, but I don't know that they're so easy to answer without deep reflection or guidance.
Yes.
Right?
The guidance piece, though, you don't need to look for someone outside of you to guide you. It can be as simple as you ask on top of a piece of paper, you write those three questions, or maybe just the one you want to focus on. You set a timer for 22 minutes, and you just write, do I feel loved? And then remembering those two things, that love requires us to balance feeling special, but feeling the same as everyone at the same time. The things that come out on the pieces of paper, and I've had my clients do this over and over again, it's always the same results. They go into it with resistance, like, what am I really going to get out of it? And one of the instructions is for the 22 minutes, you have to keep writing. So that pencil or pen never leaves the paper. They're
Right.
like, so what do I write? And I tell them, if at any point in time you hit a roadblock, you just write, I have no idea what I want to write next. I have nothing to write right now. And you just allow your stream of conscious to come. And it's always the most resistant clients that go, oh my God, I am mind blown. You would not believe, Dr. J, what came out of this experience.
Wow. So you recommend that you sit with each of these questions for at least 22 minutes and write the whole time.
Just write, yeah.
Just see what your own mind reveals.
Your unconscious, exactly.
Yeah. So, for example, if you're talking about that special feeling, that need to feel special and the need to feel the same, when you're addressing that one, you're just writing. Are you writing and acknowledging the ways that you feel special and acknowledging the ways that you feel the same, and you're writing them down, and at the end you're like, oh, I feel mostly the same as other people. I don't have enough of specialness going on. Like, I don't understand.
You could. So this is the thing where, LuAnn, type A achievers like you and I, we get instructions that are unclear and vague, and we go, wait. No.
How do I answer this, Jisun?
Yes. Yes. And this idea that we can surrender, right, to the process. The only structure is you set a timer for 22 minutes. That pen never leaves the piece of paper. I actually recommend pencil, but the only structure is 22 minutes. You just write, and that pencil never leaves the paper.
Just see what happens.
Yep. And sometimes it can feel like it's completely derailing you and taking you somewhere you're not supposed to be, but your unconscious mind always has a way of tying it all together. Your unconscious mind, your brain, does not like open loops. So as soon as you open a loop, it wants to close it. That is its job. You've opened a loop, and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to complete this task. I remember in a recent meditation, I sat down and I had this puzzling question in my mind, because I had read through one of my quote unquote vision / goals. And I wrote in my vision goal and / goals that I wanted to befriend JC. And I was like, who is JC? This was like 4 months ago and I couldn't remember. I'm like, wow, it must have been that important that I don't remember. But I knew it was important enough for me to write it, and I don't know who JC is. So I sat down in my meditation. I went into my laboratory. I did my self-hypnosis, brought myself into coherence, and I gave my unconscious mind the job. I said, who is JC? And I just allowed my unconscious mind to do what it needs to do. And wouldn't you find out, I see an image of Jim Carrey in my mind. But in the moment, I saw his face and I went, oh, what's his name? I forget what's his name. And I really, in that moment while I was meditating, I didn't know that he was JC. And I was like, why is my unconscious mind giving me this guy?
Yeah.
And I just couldn't connect it. So I came out of my trance. And as soon as I came out of my trance, it hit me. Oh my God, his name is Jim Carrey. I was sitting in my meditation going, what's his name again? Why are they showing me his face? Yes. And just so confused. But your unconscious mind, as soon as you open a loop, it's going to do everything it can to close it.
Wow. So you're supposed to meet Jim Carrey?
It is one of my top goals, vision. I want to befriend Jim Carrey.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
But it's one of those things where we wake up and we have these unconscious jobs, tasks that we gave the unconscious mind. We're not consciously aware of the tasks that we're giving it. But when we have a thought like, why am I not good enough to have a podcast that has successful listeners? You might not be consciously aware of it, but your unconscious mind now knows, okay, that is my job. I'm going to figure out why I'm not good enough to have a podcast that's successful with listeners. And then it will close that loop, and it'll give you all of the data and information to tell you and substantiate what you believe. And going back to your original question, why does our brain do that? Why does our brain focus on the quote unquote negative or bad things?
Right.
It's just, it was wired to conserve energy. So we always look for the things that are wrong. Not only do we look for the things that are wrong, it wants to be right. So even if you tell it the negative bad thing, your brain is going to go, oh, this is it. This is right. And so it creates that category and it shuts it down because it doesn't want to work and or put in more energy or effort into creating new categories. It's just a lot more work.
Mm.
So our brains are wired to be lazy in that sense.
Is there a way to redirect that thought? Like, for instance, so, interior designer listening and maybe been in business 5 years or 25 years and never feels, if they were, actually, this is the moment you have to say, are you content? Are you proud of the business that you've built in this 2 year period or 25-year period? If the true answer is no, then okay, maybe with this conversation, they're thinking how I keep finding all the reasons for no and I keep reinforcing that. But how do you break that? Like, how do
Yes.
you break that cycle?
It starts with the awareness. So when we know what we're ashamed of, we know which frequency we've distorted. And
Oh,
then once we know what we've distorted, what the thing is that we're ashamed of, what we're afraid of, we then tell our brain when we're in coherence and in a state of trance what we want to feel instead, how we want to feel aligned instead. And it goes back to what you were saying, LuAnn. The first question is, what does success mean to me? How
mm-hmm.
do I want success to feel like?
Right.
Because being happy or successful is not the same thing as being distracted or busy. And we know
Mm-hmm.
that.
Right, right. And
So
it doesn't
take,
it doesn't relate to
mhm,
money. You could be, making all the money in the world and not necessarily be happy or content. So
mhm.
you really have to get to the bottom of that, right?
Yes. Yep. So giving yourself the space, first and foremost, to be aware. So ask yourself those three questions. Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I happy? Knowing what two things that, or six things altogether you want to balance
Mm-hmm.
in coherence.
Mm-hmm.
And then get yourself to a space where maybe you take about 10 minutes to sit. And what you were saying, just relax your body. That's the first step in going into a trance.
Mm-hmm.
When you relax your body by taking five, you count five, I count Mississippi's, but 5 Mississippi in, hold it 5 Mississippis, and then breathe out 5 Mississippis, and then hold it 5 Mississippis. So that's box
Right.
breathing. You
Box
do that for a
breathing.
couple minutes to relax your body, activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And then what I do is I close my eyes and I look at the best way I can describe it is as if my eyeballs look up about 10, 25 degrees, because then it activates a different part of your brain towards
Mm,
your brain stem. And then you go into a state of trance. And at that point, you actually attach what you do want. So the
right.
good feelings that you want, attach the story that's enchanting, and then
Mhm.
actually put yourself there. That's the thing about manifesting that a lot of
Mhm.
us forget. It's not just picturing it,
You have
but
to
it's
feel it.
you
Yeah.
feel it. That's right.
You
That's the
feel it.
mind heart coherence
Yes.
when
Yeah.
you're in alignment.
Yeah. I asked you the
Exactly.
question and I knew the answer, but I didn't remember that I knew the answer. No, I mean, like, it's crazy. I mean, I literally, you know, decided the day and the
Hmm.
hour and how many hours I would be in labor for Christy's birth. Like,
Wow.
literally pegged it because I wanted
Love
it to
that.
work for X amount of practical reasons. There were
Hmm.
multiple practical reasons, and I'm not going to tell the whole story on the show, but if you guys ever see me in real life, you want to hear the story, just ask me. Um, but I literally was like, no, January 13th, I am going to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I am going to go into labor at 12 o'clock. I am having a baby. She is going, this baby, I didn't know if it was a girl or boy. It was before you figured it out all the time. Going to be in perfect health. Everything is going to be fine. And by 2 o'clock, Vin is going to be able to look at me and say, I'm going to be able to say to him, you can leave the hospital now, go. Because we had, obligations with my stepchildren. You know what I mean? And it was like
Mm.
a whole thing. But the point was that I was so invested in the outcome happening the way it did because I wanted the very best experience for me and Vin to bring a
Mhm.
child into the world, but also to support the best experience for the three stepchildren to have their sibling brought into the
Yes.
world. And so
Wow.
I was highly emotionally, passionately attached to this. And the number of times that I went, we call it when we meditate, my aunt taught us to call it go to level. The number of times
Mhm.
I went to level, it's like go to your level. And that's what we call it.
Love
That's
it.
the shorthand
Love
for it,
it.
right?
Mhm.
So the number of times I would go to level and then, actually concentrating, like you said, and attaching that emotion, it's almost like reprogramming. Like you said, like when
Mhm.
I asked you, how do you replace the positive with the negative, you're like, you go down to your laboratory and you do it. I'm like, oh yeah, right. But then
Yeah.
I would like at traffic lights, I would just visualize 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to get up and it's going to be about, blah, blah. I mean,
Yes.
Vinny looked at me. We were about halfway through the labor, and the other thing I did was I didn't do any epidural, and I meditated through the entire labor.
I love that. I
And
love
I'm
that
going
you
to
can
tell you what.
control your pain centers. Yeah,
Yes,
with
I
hypnosis.
really did. But the thing was that it was very hard to do. And so in the beginning, I was meditating through the contraction, and there was like the contractions weren't so close that I couldn't then pay attention consciously and then, really just go right back down when the pain started. And it got to a point that I couldn't come up and come down. I had to just stay down at level and manage it. And after about an hour of that, and I didn't even have a chance to warn them that's what I was doing. I just did it. And about an hour of that, a nurse, and I could hear everything. I'm wide awake. You know what I'm saying? I'm just in my level. And at one point, a nurse came in and said to him, "How's it going in here?" And he goes, "Great, I guess." And she says to him, she goes, "I've never seen anybody sleep through their labor before." And I literally like, wait a minute, you people.
LuAnn, you are amazing. You are a pro at this. I want to make sure your listeners understand the caveat when we do this. It's very important to add a disclaimer at the end, this or something better. The way you did it was like you were nail on the head, like target. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
This is it.
It doesn't always happen that way. I just wanted to make sure we
No. And then what was happening was it was just crazy because then what happened was 12 o'clock, here it comes. And he just looked at the nurse. He goes, I think she's a witch. Like I do.
I love it. So LuAnn, I know we need to wrap up, and I love that we're wrapping up with that story.
Yeah, I know.
I did notice there was a look that you gave me whenever I use the word distorted.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that I open up the space for individuals who are very interested in what that means to distort a frequency. So, for example, we have a very big distorted feminine or wounded feminine frequency that's happening in our society today. So if that's something that's very interesting for your listeners, I do work through that in what's called the Bodhi Sparks. So right now I'm dancing in the space where I'm creating a platform where we are creating community and culture for people who are empaths, creatives. They know they have a bigger purpose, but they just can't get their own selves out of the way. And this is where I'm like dancing in the space, and I'm loving it right now. So if that's something that is interesting for people, for your listeners, if they also made that face that you did, I wanted to open up that opportunity for people too.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that your listeners understand how grateful I am for the space that they have allowed for us to have this conversation, and for listening, that I wanted to give a freebie for people who are listening, a free chapter of the Bodhi Blueprint.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
So I'll make sure I'll share that link with you.
Yes, we'll put the link in the show notes. And of course, I'll make sure I mention it in the outro as well. You're a very special lady, Jisun. I appreciate you today. I really do. I had a great time talking to you. And, I'll save it for the outro. I have lots of thoughts on this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a blast.
Oh,
such a blast, LuAnn.
Thank you. I am entirely impressed, just like I was the first time I heard Jisun speak on Christy's podcast. Just so good, right? Now, I'm no stranger to meditation and mindset shifts. I've explained it to you before, that these are things I was raised on, things that I've raised my own children on, and things that I talk with my coaching clients about. But hearing the science, the actual brain research behind it, well, that's something else altogether, because I just accepted it for truth without asking why. And it's really kind of cool at this point in my life to understand there's actually a scientific basis for it. And I want to emphasize the one thing that really hit me that Jisun said today. When we tell ourselves something like, I'm not worthy, or I can't scale my business, or I'm not cut out for this, what was crazy is what she said was our brain actually starts to filter messages focusing on the things that reinforce those beliefs, right? That means that when we have limiting beliefs, they are actually shaping our reality. That's something to sit with. The stories we tell ourselves, they're powerful and apparently scientifically powerful. I want you to take it to heart because what you tell yourself in your life, your relationships, your business, it's all connected. And if you play small or hold yourself back because you think you're not capable, you're actually creating the barriers. You're creating the reality, right? But the good news is that we have the ability to change that. We tell ourselves the stories. We shape the stories. We can tap into our unconscious. We can rewrite what we're saying, and our brain will acknowledge it. This is where the power comes, right? Now, I've always told my daughters to listen to their inner goddess. So whatever you want to call it, there are real voices down inside yourself, the real ones that know you and know you are worthy and are capable and are smart and are valuable. But you have to get past the fear voices that Jisun was talking about. You have to get past the part of your brain that's trying to keep things simple, she said. The part that wants to conserve energy, the part that wants to protect you from difficult things. Because the difficult things are what will open up your blueprint for success, right? So many things today that resonated with me. And I just want to go back and repeat Jisun's polarizing needs, right? Which she mentioned. We need to feel unique and we need to feel individual to fit in. We need to feel in control, but we need to be cared for. We need to have self-power or be selfish, but we also need to be selfless. Okay, right? That last one is one that I see all the time, particularly with creatives and particularly with creatives who are out of balance. We want to give so much to others, but in that process, we lose so much of ourselves. And then, ironically, we don't have enough to give. If you are struggling with burnout, you are probably in this circle. And it reminds me of an Instagram post that Christine Platt put out. It was, oh my goodness, I don't know when it was. But Christine Platt, if you remember, she was a guest on our podcast, episode 711. And her whole conversation, I just loved the conversation. It was very powerful. But in this post, which was also extremely powerful, she mentioned that she considered herself a recovering people pleaser. And one of the ways that she had committed to breaking out of that pattern was to spend 2 times as much time caring for her own needs as she did for caring for others. So, for example, if she spent an hour helping a client, she spent 2 hours writing. And in doing that, she was able to keep herself from falling back into old patterns of neglecting her own needs. And what happened when she did this, she told us in this Instagram post, is that she found that she was actually much better capable of showing up for others as a result of taking much better care of herself. She had to stick to her boundaries and she had to stick to the promises to herself to find that balance between the polarizing needs that Jisun mentioned. But it paid off for her and it also paid off for those around her. That's the real power of a mindset shift. That's the real power of everything that Jisun talked about today. Okay, so I want to leave you with the 3 questions that Jisun mentioned at the beginning of your path to consider. Okay, when you want to figure out what you want your life and your business to be. Am I safe? Am I loved? Am I happy? Spend some time exploring where your pain is, where your limiting beliefs are, and where these things are holding you back. Okay? Jisun was incredibly generous to offer you a free chapter of her book, The Bodhi Blueprint, Ultimate Freedom. Master your fears and live life on purpose. You can find a link for that in the show notes. Please go get it. All right. Now, I know that this may hit as, okay, I'm on board. I love it. I've already clicked through. I got the book. I'm ready to start the free chapter. Stop talking. Right? And maybe you're in the other camp. I don't know about this camp, right? Skepticism, okay, it can be healthy. I agree. But I would encourage to ask yourself, if you're not feeling like you're living your life on purpose, how's that working for you? Right? How's that going? Okay. I would say if you don't have any limiting beliefs or mindset barriers that are holding you back, good for you. But I would say if you really don't have any, then you probably really aren't examining too hard. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Most of us have something. It's just the simple truth, whatever it is. Some, unfortunately, are bigger than others, and create bigger barriers. But we all have something. We all have something we could work on so that we could show up as the best version of ourselves. Okay? And that's the thing. That's what we're talking about. And according to Jisun, there's real brain science connected to it. And I love it. That means it's not just me saying, I could do it. It's me understanding that when I live it, when I think it, when I breathe it, that my brain actually works to make it happen. Okay? So figure out what your brain is saying. Figure out what you want for your life. Ask yourself those questions. Get Jisun's book. Do the work and get the rewards. If there is any show that I want to end with my typical ending, it's this one. Decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of LuAnn Niagara, Inc. If you want to know more about me, my books, or LuAnn University, go to LuAnnNiagara.com. And if you are interested in having WindowWorks help you with your next window treatment or awning project in the New York, New Jersey metro area, go to WindowWorksNJ.com to learn more. Have an excellent day.